This way. He signals with his hand when he sees me looking at him. I look for some landmark that I can fix on in that direction. It's just dunes. And in the fog of distance and pollution, I cast about for Orska. It's none of the elders, but they've all moved away to defend the camp or deal with the breakdown. To my own inexperienced eye, it seems that almost half the encampment has already been packed up, leaving telltale holes and hollows in the packed ash. Some of the smaller children are kicking grit and dust into them, hiding their presence. I can almost tell the colonel to lead the way. Almost. He's got more of an idea what to do, or pretends he has. But that'd be it. All over for me as boss. Never mind Nazareth and what happens there. The moment I give the colonel a single degree of authority, he'll take it all. His plans, his way. Goodbye, Birdman. Hello, doomed penal legion scum. Hold this line. I tell the ad hoc platoon that it's eventually formed up beside me. I turn to the rest of those that escaped Acheron. Some of them have weapons, but don't look too prepared to use them. Stay behind us. A tug on my sleeve draws my attention down to a boy, no taller than my waist. I can see the fear etched into his face, but he stays there, fighting back his terror, eyes glistening with tears. He points to a sled just behind. Karst is laying on it, legs tied down with straps, a bundle of rags under her head. Blanket, I say, giving him a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. The boy frowns, and I say it again, miming the action of wrapping myself up. He nods and runs off. Mark your targets. I don't want you shooting the wasters. I tell my small band of soldiery, turning my attention back to the sounds of gunfire and erratic flashes all around us. Shapes in the fog resolve into robe-clad allies, moving through the ash with distinctive, deliberative strides that seem ridiculously slow, but are probably quicker than the thrashing up on your knees into the stuff. I recognize Orskia, even with the scarf and mask, leading a band of her kin back into the camp over to my left. Ready with cover and fire, I shout out, bringing up my pistol. The colonel has stowed the Vox on the side of the sleds and takes up his position next to me. I give him a glance, but his eyes are fixed ahead, on the vague shapes following the wasters out of the smog banks. About 40 meters away, an eddy of wind kicks up, clearing a patch of ruddy mist. Its passing reveals a knot of enemies, carrying a stench of rotting meat and shit to us. I hear cursing and gagging as I fight back the urge to retch. I remember the mask and pull it up, others doing the same as we peer into the parting murk. The sight makes me want to rip off the mask again to throw up. 7 or 8 monstrous figures advance through the swirling fog, accompanied by their own dark miasma, which blends with the fog banks. Each looks and walks like a person in the broadest terms, but they are far from human. Their skin varies from dark, leathery brown to pale green, with patches of mold and warty growths dotting it. Each has only one eye in the middle of their forehead, beneath cracked and broken horns. Most with just one, others with two, three, and one of them with a crown of sharp antlers. Mouths with needle teeth move constantly, and the sound of murmuring carries to us. Monstrous, dreadful. Pox marks and livid scars mark their flesh, which in places is torn open, skin hanging in flaps to reveal wet muscle and glistening organs, intestines threatening to burst from puncturing guts, hanging like coiled rope. Their limbs are like those of famine victims, wasted of flesh, skin brittle and taut over bulging joints. Movement writhes under the stickly covering, occasionally bursting out of cuts and lesions to reveal itself as fresh beetles and maggots. Heavy knuckle heavy fists hold rusting, serrated blades. The corroded metal weeps with noxious fluid, running over the gripping hands and dripping into the ash. A noisome, oily vapor lifts from the unnatural weapons. the dark smoke becoming a cloud of tiny flies that gathers over the advancing Neverborn. Bullets and las blasts hit unnatural flesh, leaving grievous holes and slashes that would fell a living soldier. The abyssal servants pay no heed to their injuries, black blood oozing from their wounds, almost instantly forming scab scars. The scrape of runners on ash barely draws my attention to the camp. Adults and older children have dragged on pulley slings and are starting to haul the sleds away, although a few tents and boxes still remain. Swiftness is best defense, yells Orska, pointing out into the haze. Save bullets! More shadows follow the cantankerous demons, dozens more following, fog darkened with flies swarming around them. I can hear the maddening buzzing, a constant drone that accompanies the monotone chanting, penetrating through my body. Everything is cast in pale brown by the filter of my goggles, giving it an even more otherworldly air. Sparks of laser and gunfire cast brief flashes into the gloom. I pull down my mask to order the retreat and immediately regret exposing myself to the foetid air. I start coughing, the corpse stench clogging my nostrils and coating my throat. Pull back! I manage between heaving inhalations, trying to keep down the meager contents of my stomach. I breathed in my fair share of death's rank before, but the effect of the Neverborn is like every charnel pit, rotting, wound, and suppurating pox combined. I start to stumble back, pulling my mask on, checking the others follow. Along with the wasters, we turn our backs and press on into the clouds, glancing back to check on the demons. They haven't increased their pace at all, plowing through the drifts of ash with regular strides, as relentless and inevitable as an outbreaks of red flux. Soon, we pull enough distance between us that our pursuers fade with distance and mist, becoming dark sketches of shapes, before finally disappearing. Nobody says anything at all effort bent on pushing onwards through fatigue and fear. It starts to get darker, and I wonder what fresh, hellish malaise is about to befall us, when I realize it's simply dusk. As we advance into closing gloom, I can't stop feeling that the night might bring new horrors. I've just realized, and it took me this whole time, this whole novel, realizing I know what Nazarek is now. I know he's just the personification, for lack of a better word, of the the colonel and the colonel and it's a little better. The colonel and Cage, yeah, he personifies the struggle between the colonel and Cage. That's what he does. That's remarkably better. I guess, I mean, it's pretty fitting that they escape the plague bearers just by walking away from them. I don't think you have to do anything else besides be away from them. And yeah, they don't catch up. They have those. Well, wait, no, this was actually around the time where all those everyone had those drones. So we'll see actually if they catch up, because if they were gonna do it, that's how they would do it, or they would just teleport over there. The wasters mount torches on high poles on the sleds, but the fitful blue light from them does little but exaggerate the coils of fume and shadows that surround us. Those of us from the underhive advance in pairs and threes, one carrying a lantern, the others with weapons at the ready. Peering into the gloom, it seems that every movement could be a Neverborn or an orc, the darkness of every rock outcrop or jutting boulder a fresh horror waiting to attack. I walk with Olesh, who was quick to volunteer for the duty. I thought he was going to attack anyone else that tried to join me. A little older than me, Olesh It's one of the most recent arrivals to the Fellowship of the Burned Man, but harbors no regrets about joining my people, as he tells me over and over on the trek. His son, Dinas, is a babe in arms that rides on a nearby sled with his older cousin, Ferran. Along with Olesh's profuse gratitude, I learn of this, and far more extensively, that his family tree, I can peer at it with suspicion at every eddy of fog. And okay. The lights ahead reflect off something sparkling in the dunes, and our waster vanguard alters course, turning us to the right so that we can crest a broad hill rather than head into the valley beside it. I'd say we are going the long way around, someone says loudly behind me. I think it's probably Freitas or crossed, but don't look back to check. Better longer than Silver Sands, says one of the wasters from the other side of the road. Swallow quicker than a sleeper eel. Sweeper eels, says Olesh, staring fearfully down at the ash and then back at the waster. Do they come out at night? Mostly. My hips are aching, trying to copy the swinging gait of the wasters, all at the same time trying not to make too much sound that would attract subterranean predators. Sweeper eels are not the worst of it, from what I've heard. They are ash serpents, big enough to attack battle tanks in the deep wastes. But thankfully, we're not heading that way. The Imperial lines are dug into higher, firmer ground in the south and west of Acheron, with only armored patrols and skimmer forays into the harsher climes of the east. What is a skimmer foray? What kind of skimmers do they use? I mean, that's an interesting. I think that Gav Thorpe. I think Gav Thorpe actually had like a flashback or something back to like the old Imperial Guard when the captains had skimmers. But even then, you would just be like there'd be a couple guys in a command squad with skimmers. So maybe there's like some sort of custom Armageddon vehicle. I mean, it would make sense, but skimmer technology is highly advanced, so using it in combat in large numbers just doesn't seem like that's what would happen if I was going to be in charge of them. Mic check. Mic check. Okay. About half an hour, and Orska signals a stop, and comes back down the line. Thomas and the other elders gathering around her. Wait at the sled, I tell Olesh, and make my way over to them. The colonel, joining from the other flank of the column, the Doonseer darts me a look and says I hadn't been invited to this little conference, but I ignore her. What's the delay? I ask. Orc sign, she replies, pointing to the head of the group. Orc Rock Fort, few kilometers north of here. Old, empty, but we find tracks. Many orcs ahead moving to the fort. Between us and the abbey? Asks the colonel. Yes, Orskia tells us. Must go south to avoid. So what's the problem? We go south. South dangerous, says Elg. Old city. Ghosts. Ghosts. There's a hint of derision in the colonel's tone, but with just enough of a concerned edge that suggests our recent encounters are forcing him to reevaluate what he believes. Not dead ghosts, explains Orskia. Waste ghost. It's like Ash River, moves, nearly invisible, very hard to cross in the day, deadly at night. Streets and old ruins, full of ghosts. Ghosts or orcs? That's the choice. Or walk for whole day, says Orskia. She jabs a thumb over her shoulder. With rotting ones to follow? Ghosts it is, I say, with a forced smile. I'm sure you'll steer us right, As the Dune Seer and some of her scouts start to discuss the finer points of the challenge ahead, the Colonel signals for me to move aside and join him. We stroll a little distance from the ongoing discussion, and the Colonel talks as we move, his voice low. It is imperative that we rejoin the Imperial effort to face the coming madness. Those Warpborn are just going to get stronger and stronger, aren't they? Yes, but I'm not talking about survival. I'm talking about something more telling and important. There is a place for the last chancers in this coming war. You're cooking up some fragging insane plan, aren't you? No, I do not know yet the best way to help in the coming crisis, but there is a way to make a difference. And this is you asking me if I'll come along. I take a breath, smiling at the shamelessness of the man. First, you want to kill me. Now, you want me back. I really think you need to decide what you want. Situations change. I was mistaken in thinking you were continuing the work of Von Strab in the Underhive. That's why you came after me? I thought the burnt man, you, was fostering a new rebel army. That's why I wanted to take you down. The colonel looks at the others, around at us, and then back at me. Your experience, your instincts make you a very capable member of the 13th Legion. You just have to straighten out your priorities. I look at him sharply. What does that mean? I cut him off as I see him looking at our companions again. Leave them behind? You will not be able to save them all. That is what I'm telling you. You know this. You have to decide what the mission is, because it cannot be to protect everyone. You're a callous bastard, I snap, stepping away. People are looking at me, my voice raised, catching their attention, but I don't care. I thrust a finger at the underhivers spread through the column. They are following me, not you. Is it too hard to believe that they find something in me that they don't see in you? Humanity, maybe? With a growl, I plow through the ash, back to the sled where Olesh is waiting for me. The chosen of the Emperor must always overcome the doubts of others, he says, grabbing my hand in both of his. Adversity is the true test of faith, burned man. Others hear him and gather closer, voicing their support, patting me on the back and shoulders. Some of them are from the team Schaefer brought with him, converts to the cause. I nod my thanks and I turn my head past to see the knot of grateful followers, the colonel scowling at me from the torchlight. Eyes of ice as cold as I've ever seen them, looking at me with contempt, the same contempt I saw when he first came to get me for the 13th Legion. Those intervening years, the missions we've shared, the blood we've spilled and had spilled, all of it is like nothing to him. In the past, I always knew that the colonel wanted kill the Hive Queen, blow up the city, assassinate the target. Now I don't know what it is. His excuse for coming after me is flimsier than a rookie's backbone. He's itching to give orders, but in the Underhive and out here, nobody's listening. I don't know why he's here or what he's prepared to do to get back in charge. That means I can't trust him anymore. That's the thing, is the colonel can just keep going. I keep talking about how Cage can't be killed, but he's not like immortal. Like, I mean, dare I say demi-immortal? Like Schaefer. Schaefer, he's basically like a space. He's almost like Erebus, that guy that could like wear the Terminator Space Marine armor. He's the closest a human could be, I think, to becoming. He's like Yarick, I guess. Yeah. They're all like, they're basically just like anime, I guess. Okay, they're at the ghost ruins. Every girder is pitted and withered with age. The walls between them, little more than crumbling, wind-worn lumps, left behind in the lee of the largest remains. Orskip busies herself, getting the column to form up in two wide, bringing us all together while her scouts lash together poles at a lengths of 4 and 5 meters. With these in hand, they advance slowly ahead of the main body, prodding and prying at the shifting ash and grit, while a pair of wasters behind the group use broad paddles to cut a trail for everyone else to follow. Who lived here? Asked Golesh, gazing in awe at the jagged ruins that tower around us. There are no doors that I can see. The bases of the buildings that once stood swallowed by the rising wastes. Here and there, a bend of metal looks like a remnant of the bridge, the slopes of the dunes broken by angular roof edges, or hollows that might have once been interior stairwells. The wind hisses around rusting rails, bring to life small whirls of ash in the corners. I can see slides of darkness where ash has shifted recently, patches of slow movement that might be real or might be a product of the erratic firelight and swaying lanterns. The same illumination brings shadows to life, so it feels like something is hiding behind every bent beam and toppled rafter. No idea, I say. Was before humans, old stories say, Tormes replies, stopping a little way ahead of us, so we catch up with him. Not of not city of emperor's children. The trail we follow sometimes turns sharply, doubling back as the scouts encounter a drift or shallow they're not willing to risk. A couple of times they stop for a few minutes, arguing with each other and pointing, before changing their minds altogether and leading us on a previously unexplored street. They never cut through the spaces where the buildings once stood, as if the outlines of the ancient beams were force fields keeping us out. It's slow but steady progress, but I wonder if the warp spawned horrors on our trail care anything for ash ghosts. Do they even travel as mortals? Or can they simply extend their energy and appear at us? I look up, the first time in many hours, to see the wound in the sky still looking down at us, flaring with both immortal desire and eternal hate. The very real obstacles in front of us suddenly pale in comparison to thoughts of the threat posed by the legions of warp-born that might come pouring through that tear. That might be here already, rampaging through the hives, overrunning all the Emperor's forces and all the orcs alike. It'll make this war seem like a skirmish, I muttered to myself. What was that? Asked Olesh. What war? Nothing. Just thinking out loud, I tell him. There's no need to speculate on things that neither of us can really comprehend. Let's focus on getting to that battle, Abby, eh? A few minutes later, Dina starts crying. Olesh hurries over to quiet him, but the piercing balls shatter the stillness that pervades the city. Faran, the older boy, jumps down from the sled while Olesh clambers on board. Needs food, must be starving, poor thing, he says, stroking his son's head with one hand, rooting through the hastily bundled bags with the other. I head over and walk beside the sled. Pardon me. It had to be done. Oh, my goodness. A few minutes later, Dina starts. I head over to walk beside the sled, trying my best to help by holding open sacks for Olesh. After a couple of minutes, he finds a small pile and pulls. Wow. He finds a small bag and pulls it out. Some pieces of algae bread inside it. He breaks a piece off and gives it to the child, who takes it in a tiny hand and starts mouthing it at the soft edges with his toothless bites. Where's Ferran? Olesh says suddenly, sitting bolt upright. My heart judders at the question, and I turn, looking one way and then the other, finding no sign of the boy. Ferran! I cry out, stepping away from the drag sled. Have you seen the boy? Where's Ferran? Shrugs and shakes of the head answer my question. Everyone is wrapped up in their own heads, concentrating on putting one foot in front of the other. Ferran! I shout out, cupping my hands. Where are you? A few others gather, offering to help look. When I think I hear a quiet call, I shush everyone and turn slowly, turning to get a bearing on the sound. It's definitely a child's voice, not too far away, off to the left, I think. I start towards it, calling out again. Come look at this, Come look at this, burned man! Ferran shouts at me, appearing from behind a leaning upright of dark metal and flaking rust. He must be 7 or 8 years old, I reckon, thin, like most underhivers, with long dark hair that reaches almost to his waist, wrapped in oversized clothes given by the wasters. Look at this! He makes a few more paces, pointing to something in the mist of the building. Wait there, don't move, I call back, hurrying towards him. Reaching the boundary of the old tower, I stop and see what he's pointing at. Bones and skulls, a pile of them, nestled in a heap of half ridden by gray dust. Orc skeletons. The shape of the jaws mark the shape of the jaw marks them out instantly. Guess we're not the only ones to have come this way, I say to myself. I raise my voice. Varong, stay where you are. It's not safe. A looming presence and fungal smell heralds the arrival of Nazrek. The orc stands behind me, leaning forward as it looks out in the night gloom. I do want to point out, um, Mr. Thorpe, that like on this page it talks about his heralding, and on this page he's there. So that was kind of fun. I don't know if that was intentional, but it worked out great. The orc stands beside me, leaning forward as it looks out in the night gloom. Much green here. Here, I say, suddenly nervous. I dart a glance around our surroundings, a hand moving to my pistol. Orcs are here now? Old green. Deep green. What does deep green mean? I ask, turning my gaze to Ferran. I tell him not to move again. Whole world deep green. Oldest green. The more I look at the skeletons, the clearer it is, even in Armageddon's harsh conditions, they wouldn't have been stripped and polished so nice since the invasion began. Older than that. Maybe the orcs came here during the previous war? Could that be what Nazarek is talking about? Why is all of Armageddon green? Asks the colonel, arriving on the other side of the orc. Olash steps up beside me, child cradled in his arms, concerned looks directed at his nephew. Come back, Ferran! He shouts. Come back right now! I'm going to get the bone, uncle. The boy calls back, taking a couple of steps towards the remains. Oldest green, rumbles Nazarek. It's speaking louder, agitated by whatever thoughts are passing through its brain. Stronger, green and stone. Green makes orcs smarter. Green makes orcs better. Stop right there. Stop right there, bellows Olesh. I see the darkness out of the corner of my eye, a patch of shadow behind Ferran, seeping closer. There's too much going on. Nazrek's grunting and grumbling. Olesh is shouting. The high pitched calls of the boy telling us he's fine. Ash Ghost! I manage to shout, thrusting a finger towards the spreading patch of moving grains. It looks like something alive, curving across the slope of the dust and grit, like something underneath its changing direction, showing me it's going towards Ferran. Ferran! Olesh shouts again and again and starts forward, quickly sinking to his knees as he forges through the drift. Come back! The colonel bellows. The ash ghost widens, spreading between Ferran and Olesh. As the man wades onwards, he turns, and I see he's still carrying Dinas. I take 2 steps after him, shouting warnings, as the ash ghost darkens, the trickle of grains quickening, as though emptying into a hollow beneath them. A hand clamps around my elbow. It is too late, says the colonel. Go after them, and you will die too. Olesh is about 4 meters from Ferran, about 10 meters from me. He's up to his thighs now. The boy lighter is just ankle deep, and he's trying to get to the bones, further away from us. Dinas starts to cry again, and Olesh realizes what he's done. Turning his head with an expression of pure horror on his face, he stops, caught between going after Ferran and heading back with Dinas. Get back! I shout, tearing my arm from Schaefer's grip. I'll get Ferran. Take this. I turn my head to find Orskip behind me, a coil of thin rope in hand. I nod and grab the offered end and quickly tie it around my waist, even as I push the moving ash. It really is like stepping into a river, except it's warm, not cold. The sensation of movement pressing my calves together, and then my knees as I go deeper. Olesh has managed to turn around, but in doing so is waist deep, sliding sideways with the flow of the ghost. I use my arms to help pull myself forward, almost swimming through the drift, feeling it tugging me down. Broad sweeps of arms and legs, fighting against the gravity, sucking me into its choking depths. Ferran is crying now, trying to come towards us. He loses his footing and falls sideways, one leg disappearing into the dry swell of ash, flailing with his arms. I see his face in a glimpse of starlight, eyes wide like a grok's, and a slaughtered barn. All I can taste is ash, clogging up my nose and filling my throat. I push onward toward it, wishing I brought my mask and goggles, eyes squinting through the dust cloud thrown up by the boy's thrashing. Stupid way to die. So stupid. I lunge the last couple of meters, fingers closing around Ferran's wrist. Iron tight grip. Nothing's going to prise my fingers apart while I haul him towards me. Fraggin' stupid little fraggin' bastard, I snarl, even as I drag him closer and wrap my arms under his, pulling his body clear of the sucking ash. Come on! He's dead weight in my arm, but that's better than him struggling, as I use my free hand to push myself around. The ash now up to my ribs, the hiss of its movement so loud in my ears that I can barely hear anything else. Pull! I shout, gripping the rope. Pull us out! Wasters and hivers, and Azrag haul on the rope. We accelerate quickly, cutting into the thickest, deepest part of the ash ghost. The drag worsens, trying to pull my legs even deeper. Ferran's weight like an anchor. I struggle to get to my waist and look to our rescuers. I realize I can't see Olesh and Dinas. There's a separate crowd of onlookers that has moved meters further along the edge of the building, staring at something down where we were. Turning my head, I catch a glimpse of an upraised hand. Shit! I spit ash and try not to see an image of the father and son disappearing into the grave, suffocating slowly. The boy never really understanding what is happening as he dies, choking their last breaths, clinging together. What is Olesh saying? The boy doesn't understand, but maybe his father tells him it'll be okay. I can't do it. I can't let it happen, not this time. I entangled my arm from Ferran, and my fingers work clumsily at the knot of the rope behind us. I'm trying to work fast, tears streaming, not just from the grit in my eyes, but the thought of the tragedy unfolding just a few meters away, it's just so fragging pointless. I managed to slip out of the rope and bind it around Ferran's chest. Pull! I shout again. Pull, you emperor forgotten bastards! As Ferran starts to plow through the ash, I turn, letting the slip of the ghost carry me with it. It's so much easier than fighting the flow, just surrendering to its strength to pull me along. I go for a second, totally covered by ash and dust, and then pull myself free, gasping for breath. Where? I scream to the people at the side. Where? They holler and point. Somewhere just behind me. I turn, long strokes, and quick kicks propelling me across the ash coast, once more fighting its inevitable pull. I can't see anything. Olesh! I'm hoarse from inhaled dust and shouting, but I call again. Olesh, where the frag are you? My strength in my legs is fading. I stop, trying to catch my breath. Can't give up. Frag that. I hear a babe's wail off to my left and half swim towards it. There in the gloom and gray, I see a pale flash of skin. Dinas bobbing in the surface of the ghost. I haul myself closer and see there's actually fingers around his neck. Olesh is holding him from above the ash. I reach out, trembling fingers, and pluck the child up, pulling him over my shoulder. Olesh's hand disappears, but I thrust my other hand into the whipping dust, plunging my fingers deep after him, almost into my shoulder. My fingertips touch cloth, and I grab, arcing my back as I pull everything I have. Screeching for breath, Olesh breaks the surface ahead of me, face caked in dirt, blinded. Burn man? He cries. Burn man, he cries. Where's Dinas? Safe, I say, turning my back. I got him. The two of us latch together, forming a sort of human raft, kicking ourselves gently to the surface. I slowly turn my head back towards the others, wary that any more sudden motion might disturb the ghost and set us sinking again. We float for a few seconds, gasping and crying. In the periphery of my vision, I see Nazrek wading a little deeper in the ash. A lump of masonry comes flying through the starlight, a rope tied behind it. It smacks into the ghost about 3 meters to my right. Easy now, I say to Olesh, and together we carefully swim our way to the rope, taking 3 or 4 minutes to cover just a few meters. I set Dinas into the stone, legs either side of the rope, and embrace Olesh, keeping child and stone between us as we get dragged to safety. When we finally reach firmer ground, wasters and hivers plunge in after us, pulling us free, laughing, crying. I haul myself out of their hugs and congratulatory slaps, whipping grime from my face as I look for the colonel. I stop right in front of him, using a fingertip to clear tear-soaked ashes from my eyes. I flick the dirt away and stare at him, right in the eye, but I saw nothing. I turn away, spitting dust. I have nothing more to say to him. We're finished. I don't know why he's upset with the colonel. The colonel was look. The whole thing was just a ridiculous series of events. Okay, if you're not if you can't keep yourself safe, don't save someone else. I guess the coolest thing about Cage's superhero is superpower is he no one ever really knows that he has it. I guess they always underestimate that. Yeah, I don't know why he's upset with the colonel. Even I mean, the colonel didn't force him to do anything. He was just like, "Don't go," and then he grabbed him. I would have done the same thing. Um, what that entire, what that entire, what that reminds me of is actually the very first, and I bring this up quite a bit, but the very first book chronologically in all of Warhammer, which starts the Horse Heresy, which is called Horse Rising. After they defeat the Lightning People, there's two space marines. There's like a sergeant and a captain, and the sergeant looks at the captain and he's like, why do we have to make war on these people and kill them? And the captain, he's like, well, if you saw a drowning boy at sea, would you try to save him? And the sergeant said, well, of course, captain. And the captain said, well, what if the boy did not realize that he was drowning? What if he kicked out at you in his panic? What if he knew he was drowning and he kicked out at you in his panic? Like what if all these things? And that's basically what that entire. So I'm fairly certain that Gab knew what he was doing. I think that I might. I'm just torn once again. I'm torn in two between thinking that he writes for this sort of like intellectual property, sort of just clearly stating what things are, and that's why they have him do certain novels because they're like, well, we need someone to write about Eldar. No one else is going to do it. He'll follow the rules. But there's another part of me that makes me fear greatly that he actually writes with a subtlety that is only perceivable if you're like looking for it. That part haunts me because that means if I ever doubted him, that makes me the fool. Or I could just be a conspiracy theorist and I'm just starting to connect dots that aren't there. Which that might be the best of all. That might be the best of all the possibilities. Now that I think about it, the book with possibilities beyond possible. With everything else that's happened, I really shouldn't be surprised when the still of the night is broken by a drown out howl. Dune wolves, says Orskia, a word I've never heard before and wish I hadn't now. Dangerous? I ask. Another chorus of howls resounding from the smog shrouded twilight, already knowing the answer. Not if not if we stay close, she tells me. That's a problem. It's been about an hour since we left the ghost ruins, covering maybe 3 kilometers in that time at the most. There's a reason nobody moves at night in the wastes, and even Orska's people are floundering at times. I haven't done a head count in the few minutes, but there's definitely less of the hivers than we set out, just lost in a crevasse or falling behind. Occasionally, a distant cry for help alerts us to their absence. Even more occasionally, we find them, not too far from the group. We can't spend too long looking for the stragglers. Those never born are behind us, and still coming after us, as sure as the God Emperor sits down a log. Every few minutes, a burst of static, followed by a verse of somber chanting, announces the colonel checking our bearings towards the Battle Abbey. Each time we wince, knowing the sound is carrying far, wondering what it might attract. And now there are howls ahead and to the right. Everyone stick together, I call out, sweeping my gaze over the group. A fresh eruption of throaty howls sounds nearby, over to the left this time. I see my dwindling followers staring with fear into the night, trying to see past the ring of lantern bearers we have set as pickets on the edge of the group. Youngsters ride in the sleds with the baggage, cradling the few infants, leaving the adults to guard them. On one of the biers lies Karst, still unconscious. Some of the oldest wasters take turns to ride with her, to save their legs and check her dressings. Each time one of them relinquishes the duty to their next, their expressions are graver than before. Her future is measured in hours, and probably single figures at that. There! Whispers someone behind me. I turn just in time to see them pointing off to the right. Something large and canine slinks through the fog on the edge of vision. Several more shapes follow it. Nobody run, I warn, pulling out my pistol. They won't attack the group. More there! Comes a gentle call from behind. I almost stumble over a rock as I look back, just glimpsing from movement to the left. Circling us, I say. Everything falls silent. but for the hiss of runners in ash and the pad of feet. I hear panting and growls, coming from both sides. Orskia must hear it too. Everyone has their hoods pulled back despite the cold, straining for any warning, and darts me a wary look. Getting closer, I almost mouth, the words without sound. Everybody is slowed, caution overtaking their thoughts. Both I and Orskia signal for them to keep going, though it seems obvious that the dune wolves are moving ahead of us. We can't be more than a kilometer from the siege lines. If we even get there, we might find a command bunker, or maybe just a gun line we can hole up in and wait at night. Ahead is our best chance of surviving, even if it is also the most dangerous route. The growling intensifies, and then, all of a sudden, there's a monstrous road ahead. Something nearly the size of a horse dashes into view for a moment and then disappears. Answering snarls and bestial growls sound from left and right, accompanied by the heavy drumming footfalls and swirls of fog cut by immense four-legged beasts. The howls become whines of terror, swiftly followed by more snarling, the wet rasp of flesh being torn apart, and the snap and crunch of bones. Agonized animal shrieks filled the air, dozens of them, punctuated by noises of rending jaws and guttural growls. I'm tumbling even as I walk, numb with shock and fear. A bellow and pointing cleaver from Nazareth has all eyes snapping to the left. A creature plows through the mists, passing through the circle of lamplight for several seconds. A face that's part canine, part reptilian, lips drawn back from teeth like combat knives. Its horned head is bound by a frilled crest, scaled skin a gleaming orange in the lantern's glow. A tail like a scorpion's sting whips behind it, before the massive beast is lost in the plume of ash kicked up by its charge. I can just about make out the devil hound pouncing into something smaller, something that would be easily twice as heavy as me, to look like a horse pet by unnatural. This wording, wow. I can just about make out the devil hound pouncing onto something smaller, something that would just be easily twice as heavy as me, made to look like a house pet by the unnatural predator's bulk. Jaws snap around the dune wolf's head, crushing it with one titanic bite, while glinting claws rake out its gut, spraying ropes of steaming entrails. Screams from children and adults alike pierce my sluggish thoughts. Some idiot fires a las bolt into the gloom, and within seconds a hail of blasts and bullets scream out into the darkness. Stop! Stop! I shout, dashing the sleds, shoving my las pistol into the waistband of my trousers. Run! We need to run! I never questioned my own survival instincts, and I'm not starting to now. I grab a rope and start pulling, helping the waster already in front of the sled, like a draw animal in the traces of a wagon. The ash shifts under my boots, and I get enough grip to pull up some momentum. Around me, other wasters take up the call, bending their backs into the drag ropes. Orskia yells something, and the children riding among the loads start pushing off boxes and bags, lightening the sleds. We surge forwards, starting to find a rhythm between us. Some of the older children take guns from their parents and loose off occasional shots into the night. I don't know their aim. People like hivers and wasters learn to fight and shoot from the time they can pick up a gun. I've always preferred knives, but before I was 10 years old, I could reliably hit a sour fruit from 30 paces. Ahead, I see something large glooming up through the gloom. It takes a moment for it to register as a gun bastion, the roof silhouetted against the haze of sky. There are shouts from those in front, partly of joy, partly of warning, of trenches and gun pits. I turn, checking the others, and that's when I see the demon hound. It breaks a wall of fog about 60 meters ahead of me, tatters of a dune wolf, fur and flesh hanging from iron-toothed jaw. I catch a glint of a bronze collar and the gleam of lamps on the back of its sled. The two small girls and the two small girls and boy riding among the baggage shriek, high-pitched squeals of pure terror as the hound breaks down on us. As the hound bears down on us, covering half a dozen meters with each bounding stride. My past flashes back to me, recollection ramming into my thoughts, taking me to the trench lines outside Coronorum, bullets from a heavy stubber, tracking towards me, sprinting like a fragging idiot across the open ground between two armies, 10 strides from death. That's the difference between making it to the trench and getting caught by that abyssal monster. Unless I let go of the rope, thoughts race through me, and one hand releases its grip even before I know what I'm doing. It's like something else is controlling me, a far greater power than my rational brain. The other hand lets go, and I'm free of my burden. But it's not to run. I pluck the pistol from my belt again and vault the sled as the demon hound reaches me, landing heavily and the churned ash behind it. The terrified faces of the children flashing past. I take aim and shoot, the red bolt sizzling in the night, to hit the ash beside the oncoming behemoth. I have no idea what a puny las pistol can do against a monster. It's like throwing pebbles at a battle tank. But I'd rather die fighting than running, which is an odd sensation for me. I fire again, hitting the shoulder of the charging brute. And then again and again. No point saving a power cell, right? Can't use it when I'm dead. I sidestep as I fire, and the hound veers towards me, changing direction, just enough that it isn't heading straight toward the sleds. After about 40 meters away, wide eyes reflecting the dwindling lantern light. A deeper crack than the zip of my pistol startles me. Orskia firing her heavy rifle, picking a shot for every three or four of mine. The snap of the colonel's lasgun on my right. Blue beams across the path of my shots, striking the head and crest of the monstrous dog. 20 meters. The boom of Nazrek's pistol is quickly drowned out by the orc's throaty bellow as it pounds past us. We stop firing, unable to draw on our target without hitting Nazrek. Xenos charge, and the abyssal predator. Xenos Savage and Abyssal Predator meet about 50 meters ahead of me. Nazar's choppa hacks off a clawed foot, sweeping towards its face, but dagger fangs bury deep into the orc's forearm. Borne backwards by the demon hound's momentum, Nazareth falls, choppa buried in the side of the hound's head. The abyssal monster has its jaws right on Nazareth's arm, but the orc heaves to its feet, roaring as it rips away from the beast, tearing off its own arm at the elbow to be free. It punches its heavy pistol into the eye of the hound, firing as it does. Brutal high-caliber slugs rip through the skull of the hound, tearing it apart, even as the orc's fist continues the journey, punching into the head of the demon creature. The hound thrashes into the dunes for seconds, rolling down a bank, and then starts to dissolve into a bloody pool. Nazareth stops to retrieve its arm from disintegrating jaws, cleaver still in hand. More shapes lope through the fog. Not safe yet, snaps Orska. Run, boss, bellows Nazareth before forging into the swirling fog, the small shape of Grot scuttling after. Gunfire from the trench line behind us screams past, targeting demon hounds still advancing after the hivers and wasters. Together, under the covering fire of the folks in the bunker, we reach the trenches gratefully and climb down into the protective shadows. That was, begins Orska, but I cut her off with a raised hand. I turn away, stumble a few steps, and then throw up, vomiting nothing but stomach acid and bitter waster tea. My legs finally give up, holding me upright, and I collapse against the trench wall, heaving breaths into my punished legs. Emperor be praised, says someone close by. I look up and find one of the underhivers, Nyoima, looking down at me, a canteen of water held out. Once more he delivers you from the very teeth of death, burned man! I take the canteen from him and swing metallic tasting water, swirling around my mouth before spitting out the remnants of the vomit. Handing back the water bottle, I pull myself to the firing step and look out of the trench. In the flash of las bolts and muzzle flare of autoguns, I see more hounds, maybe half a dozen. No sign of Nazarek. Just the just delaying the inn, that's all, I tell Noema, dropping back down to the trench. Less praying, more shooting. I guess they found more of the I guess they found more of the survivors. Yeah, so like there was a point when the survivors dropped to hundreds to dozens, and it was when the demons came. It was after the demons. So they went and they hung out with those orcs, and they were both parties were about to like kill each other, and the demons came. They ran away from the orcs. The orcs couldn't forsake their bloodlust. They had to fight the demons. But after that, right after that, it went from hundreds of survivors to dozens, and I was just like shocked. And it talks about it nonchalantly, but that makes sense now. Those guys, Noema or Neoma or whatever, he he and his people made it to the trench. He and his people made it to the trench. So there's like a splinter group, I guess, which makes sense. I guess I just figured that every single time a group broke off from the main group, they just died. The only reason being that that's kind of just the formula of the last chancers, that you start off with a large and practical group. There are some times when the rhythm of my reading matches up with the rhythm of Thorpe's writing, and it really works out well. But those moments just seem to happen so much more in the third book. I would say those moments happen the most in the third, but they still happen enough here. And when they do happen, it's really quite a thrill. It's almost like the characters are speaking through me. I feel like I'm not even a participant. I'm more of just a medium for these people. Some of them feel alive. Some of them feel alive. But there's like characters, and then there's these other people like that one guy that went swimming to the ash ghosts. That I knew that something would happen as soon as he was introduced. I'm like, oh, something's gonna happen. Um, I think a crucial difference between this book and the others, and I'm not prepared to comment on whether I prefer it or I don't even think it's a more preferred or less preferred thing. But I think that the structure of the entire book changes because instead of trying to kill something, they're trying to save themselves. So that in itself will just change the entire format. Um, and I really like it restructures the hurdles, and I think I welcome it just because I want a lot of the same, but I'm ready for a bit of the new. So I think it changes it doesn't change the formula. It mirrors the formula, which I'm cool with. Which yeah, I'm cool with that. Uh, Mr. White. I've had many sleepless nights in my life, waiting for some miserable demise or other. The night in the trench is no different, but for the fact that the thought of dying doesn't feel like a failure anymore, sporadic bursts of gunfire and terror intersperse the old familiar sensations of numb fatigue and boredom. The sentries call out the alarm, and I rouse myself, but each time feels a little less real. Death hounds and blood warriors, tentacled pox beasts born of slug and nightmare, cackling flame sprites, and screeching fanged sky sharks. The coldness bites into the early hours of the morning, turning breath to fog and fingers to ice. Senses dulled by exhaustion and fear start to wane. I can't feel the ferrocrete and flakboard beneath my boots. or taste the air anymore. Reality becomes a patch of lantern lit trench in a bunker, no more than 15 meters of defense between the ruddy gloom of the abyss that tries to swallow us. Nobody talks. The moans of the wounded break the still between the violence filled moments of brightness and cacophony. I think about gathered fields, those unreal slivers of reality that keep ships protected in warp space. Madness and death, that's what we are told they hold back. It's true, to a point. They never said that madness and death clothe themselves in makeshift bodies that could turn you, that could cut you open with their blades. They forgot to mention that the warp could become walking disease, corrupting lungs with a breath, its unnatural touch turning flesh to poison slurry. Perhaps I'm sleeping. It certainly seems the stuff of warp dreams. I'm still on the ship, transitioning to Armageddon. Everything here is warp fluence and bad memories, the abyssal messenger, and the heinous things it did with my body, the burned man, the impossible creatures in the mists. Maybe none of it has actually happened. The Geller field strained at the pressures of the warp, while a lone navigator peers into insanity made form, picking our way through the eternal darkness with only the light of the Emperor to guide us. That makes sense. All a warp dream, manufactured reality to make sense of a Geller field collapse. If this was real, I'd have to be crazy, right? The last bits of sanity that I was clinging to after the Brightsword mission have finally given away, a frayed rope of sense parting under the constant strain, especially the part where the blood warriors, mounted on grok-sized steeds of scarlet flesh and brass, advance among packs of slavering demon beasts and sword-bearing warpborn. I laugh as I see chariots pulled by more of the metal behemoths. From a Ferrocrete bunker roof, the lasgun I took from a waster corpse in hand, it seems like an army of the most ancient myth arrays itself against us, complete with the sound of braying horns and flapping banners. It's as divorced from Tau battlesuits and orc hordes as the blue sky is from the Underhive, two things that don't share the same universe. A fresh blare of horns announces the advance, and I laugh, ignoring the looks of shock from my companions. Orskia follows. I mouth something I don't really hear. I can feel the war heat prickling my skin again, touching along my nerves. I thought dead. For a fleeting moment, I wonder if maybe I'm not even sleeping, but dead. I've met a lot of people from different worlds, different species even, and some of them have very odd ideas about what happens when we die. I've never seen it as anything other than the end, but I billeted with troopers that think the Emperor takes you to a paradise of peace and plenty. Others say our souls join the great God Emperor after death, sustaining his immortal presence. Maybe that is what happens. Maybe when you die, your soul just goes to this place of insanity where nothing is real and you keep fighting. You keep fighting for the Emperor. Yeah, that's the correct one. That is actually the correct. He's right. He does know. Cage knows what happens. If you saved, if you're saved, your salvation is you get to fight for the Emperor forever. Or rather, I guess not forever, but you get to fight on the side of the Emperor with all the Emperor's armies against all of the Emperor's enemies in the final battle. That's what you get to do. So I mean, I get that's pretty cool. I guess if Cage thinks that, then he knows where he's going, and he truly is saved. He's been redeemed. But that's all you get. You don't get anything. There's nothing awesome, or there's no endless paradise, or there's just that final battle that you get to participate in. What if all those times I thought I'd cheated death, I actually hadn't? Maybe I've died again and again. We're called the last chancers. Why would I keep coming back to this place? Unless it was because I'm not really alive, but battling for the God Emperor and the darkness of the abyss itself. I'm still laughing as I watch the army of blood warriors closing. I wish we had artillery and las cannons and heavy bolters, but we face the oncoming tide of unnatural beasts and soldiers with nothing but las bolts and bullets. And faith? Even as I think this, I can hear the clarion of the Emperor's eternal voice in the wind. Is he with me? Is that why he brought me to his afterlife of war to keep fighting? The preachers tell me that the Emperor protects again and again. Every prayer and hymn and exhortation tells us that we must die for his service so that he may protect humanity. I did that once already. I gave my life through myself into the flames. Still here, though. Do we need to fight on the other side? Maybe it isn't the Emperor that protects, but the souls of the dead fighters fighting in the darkness of the everlasting war. And if that's true, then I can't die. And maybe accepting that is why I can look at the wall of nightmare and death coming upon us and not feel afraid. That moment of pure grace, I felt, as though I was falling to the flames, comes upon me again. The breath of the Emperor and the singing swells, lifting my soul, cutting through the madness of laughter, filling me with the strength of his sacrifice. I can hear the words clearly, the rolling high Gothic that I can't understand, but which brings back my earliest memories of tales of the Emperor's righteous smiting. No preachers in the underhive of Olympus, but we carried on with the pure word of the Emperor all the same. Imperius, Dominus, Eternus. But like a dawn breaking, light shines upon from above. A yellow glow of the Emperor's blessed illumination, the song of praise reaching its crescendo. I stand up, lifting my arms to the blessing, allowing it to pour into me. I hear the roaring of his anger. The ground shakes with it, causing the bunker to tremble. His wrath breaks upon the warpborn like a storm. Bolts of righteous light burn through the air, searing wounds through the oncoming horde. Like the flicker of bolter trails, his ire carries destruction into his foes, a withering storm of vengeance that fells all that it touches. The light is blinding, yet in its passing I see clearly, as if the fog has dogged us since leaving the underhive, has been a blindness of spirit rather than the eye. I look upon the deceit of the enemy laid bare, nothing but rage given form, robbed of its power by the divine spirit of the Lord of Terra. The anger of the abyss is nothing to the pure hatred of he who guards humanity. That hate takes form, solidifying upon the battle churned ash before us. Warriors and plate of silver, their own banners of red and white flying above them. With them come beasts to match the bronze giants, spitting white fire, hurling salvos of holy missiles into the monstrous ranks of the abyssal host. My madness is cleansed by their arrival, even as the dunes are cleansed by unceasing fusillades of bolt rounds and burning promethium, from transports and tanks, from the address of from the address systems of battleplate. Female voices sing the battle hymns of the Emperor. As their weapons purge the enemy, their righteous songs purge fear. I look upon saviors and know that the Emperor indeed protects, for they are the battle sisters of the Adepta Seratas. Something that was odd about this, like, I'm going to say probably close to 5th to 7th edition of Warhammer, is there was just this trend that basically everything through some means or another had achieved a form of fearlessness, and And what this meant is things like demons, which were scary, just it didn't. It's like it. The true terror of demons, I think, is kind of underestimated by many tabletop players for two main reasons. First of all, the demons were mostly just introduced as lesser demons and greater demons, and they were two units in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, which allowed you to use demons and Chaos Space Marines in the same army, which was cool. But the entry compared to like the luster of the lore of the other entries, it just seemed meager. They just seemed like it was just like stapled in there. But you could do something really cool with it. There was, I guess, the only really scary thing you could do with them. The scariest thing would be to like demoralize your opponent because the lesser demons. Oh, I think there were demons. There were lesser demons, greater demons, and then there were furies. Yeah, there were three things. And the fury models looked like wizard. Like they looked like something from the Wizard of Oz. Really, they didn't look like they fit. So it would just with all these things, they didn't seem scary. But the scariest thing about it is basically you could put the demon anywhere on the table. So I mean, that's pretty scary. I mean, just like it didn't affect the troops, but it affected the commander because you'd always have to be like, where are they coming? And then the greater demon, you could sacrifice a sergeant to bring the greater demon into play. That was always a treat because your sergeants typically were always in the midst of fighting. Chaos Space Marines didn't hang back as far as I remember. Yeah, no, they. Oh yeah, no, they Chaos Space Marines licked their lips because they got they unlike their Space Marine counterparts, they were treated to a bolter, a bolt pistol, and a knife, which made them far more lethal. You'd have to read the fine text to figure out why or how, but it made the Chaos Space Marine better than the Space Marine. I'm ranting now, but this terror that Cage is feeling isn't really like, well, it's either just like, okay, demons came, everyone died, or demons came, we are we're Grey Knights. Who cares? We're so and it's because I believe because a long time the lore influenced the game and the game there was like this flux. There was like this great transfer of ideas between these very different mediums, these completely different like one's a war game, one which both there's two people interacting and one's a book. But there were ideas developed in both camps and they came together. But the only problem with this is the war gamers never really got to appreciate the true terror of demons, and I don't think they ever really will. Well, I mean, there was summoning, which was diabolical. That was terrible. No, I think I never mind. Demons have always been scary, but just not. It's hard. I think in a way that maybe Cage's as the commander, maybe Cage's fear of them is similar to my commander on the battlefield, or at least what I want my enemies to fear, which is just like they could be anywhere, and it just kind of like diminishes your vision. Instead of you getting this cool, big, grand battle scope, that's like, well, whose Waterloo is it going to be? Now, like it changes to a completely different battle. Maybe that's what the demon does. Maybe that's what demon fear is, because basically what Cage is talking about here is his entire scope of battle just became narrowed and grayer until he just like, well, he just became mad. He started laughing at the charioteers as they started bellowing their war horns. Everyone else was just shocked and terrified because they knew what it meant, but Cage just he was just he was taken back by how absurd it was. And I never really took a moment to realize, yeah, it is absurd what the demons do and how they fight. Yeah, it makes me wonder actually. No, you couldn't make a modern demon. The closest thing to that is Belacor. The closest thing to a modern demon. Oh, you could give demon princes a lot of high tech weaponry. Probably, actually, you could give demon princes an array of dazzling weapons. So maybe that could be your most modern demon. You could do that. A lot of them are Chaos Space Marines too. How swiftly salvation turns to peril. While squads of battle sisters secure the area, others turn upon the miscellany of humans in their midst. It's impossible to know their intent, expressions hidden inside their full helms, weapons trained on us as they advance upon the siege line. They wear they wear metal enameled armor, ornate and burnished to gleam, while white robes lined with scarlet. One bears a banner with a stylized skeleton depicted on it, and all are marked with the skull imperator crowned with a spiked halo. Exculpator! The colonel shouts, hands cupped around his mouth. Exculpator! I guess it's some kind of call sign, and add my voice, the cry taken up by the others. The battle sisters maneuver to surround us, a thicket of bolters, heavy bolters, and a multi-melta, ready to turn us into bloody paste and vapor if we are deemed to be a threat. Immolator tanks with spark-tipped heavy flamers stand guard over us, while silver-clad maidens of the Emperor's wrath sweep the surrounding defenses. The colonel tries to make himself known, but his attempt to speak with our saviors is met by the silent injunction of the raised bolters. I can't say I blame the battle sisters. Wasters and deserters are not exactly high on the list of righteous folk. After several minutes, the rhino transports draw up, collecting most of the force along with nearly a score of dead and wounded. We have casualties too, I call out as the rhinos start to move off. 10 bolter muzzles greet me as I approach the battlement of the bunker roof, my hands held over my head. Some of us are nearly dead. Take 'em with you. My request is met with silence, but judging by the movements of the battle sisters, they are communicating by Vox. One of them, with more ornate insignia from the others, approaches the foundations of the bunker. A rhino rumbles forward with her, stopping a few meters from the trench, bathing us in its searchlight. Identify yourself, a female commands from the transport's Voxhaler. Colonel, I say, turning to him, maybe you should handle this. He steps next to me. Colonel Schaefer, 13th Penal Legion, Acheron Command. I can't imagine the Sister Superior's surprise, seeing the disheveled, waster-clothed man claiming to be a colonel of the Astra Militarum. Hopefully, the call sign was allayed some of her doubts, but in all honesty, I'd not take any chances. But in all honesty, I'd not take any chances if I'd met us either. We look like looters, or worse. Surrender to the authority of the Order of the Argent Shroud, demands this battle sister, her voice given a harsh edge by the address system of the power armor. We are at your mercy, the colonel replies. Praise the Emperor for your arrival. Bring forth your wounded, the battle sister tells us. Put down your weapons. It takes a few min- it takes a few minutes to comply. We carry out cars to two others, too injured to walk, using the long sleds as bridges over the trenches to help them back down beside the rhino, while the battle sisters inspect them one by one and then load them onto the transport. Half a dozen more of ours make their way out, assisted by able bodied companions. They are searched thoroughly and then allowed to embark. All the while, the guns of the Adeptus Serratus are trained on us. Are you from the Abbey of St. Silva? I asked the Sister Superior. It was your hymns that guided us here. It was the Emperor that worked through you, burned man, says one of my followers, and the others add their praises and testament. The sister says nothing, her helmet turning slowly to take in sight of the colonel, the wasters, and the underhivers, before turning to look at me. You are their preacher? She asks. I wouldn't say that, I reply quickly, realizing what that might sound like. He is the burned man, chosen of the Emperor, bearer of the light of Terra, one of my followers calls out. A chorus of praise follows, ringing hollow in my ears as I look at the reflection of myself on the lenses of the battle sister's helm. Her bolter rises just a few centimeters, enough to become threatening again. By what authority do you claim to spread the word of the Emperor? Even through the address system, I can hear the accusation of the system of the question. To what diocese are you attached? I'm not a preacher, I tell her. I don't claim to be a preacher. He's more than a mortal bearer of the word, another of my underhive companions offers, making me cringe. He is the burned man, the returned one. The breath of the Emperor flows through him. You claim you lay claim to these powers? The Sister Superior demands, thrusting the muzzle of the bolt gun towards me. I fall to my knees, caught between the bolter and the desperate stares of my remaining followers. I see the colonel gazing down at me and read the expectation on his face, waiting for me to renounce everything that has happened just to save my skin. I take a breath and look up at the battle sister, trying to focus past the massive barrel of the weapon. Faceless, she seems more like an animated statue than a living servant of the god emperor. I can feel the static of her power armor dancing across the hairs on my arm and smell the holy oils used to lubricate it. I died and I live again, I say, letting my hands drop to my lap. I straighten my back, determined to face my execution with whatever dignity can be mustered, kneeling and bloodied ash, about to have my head blown off in front of those that think me blessed. My arms itch and the back of my neck pulses in time with my heartbeat. I feel the quickening of my nerves. It isn't the static of the armor causing the reaction. Though it was unexplained, I'd come to trust this new instinct. The abyssal spawn are returning, I say, staring straight at the sister superior. What wit? She stops when the retort of bolters sound from the sentry line beyond the trenches. As one of the other battle sisters peel away, forming into squads as they move out in the battle again. Within seconds, the whole company has moved from static force to mobile assault, engines roaring, and raised voices exulting battle prayer as they move out over the ash dunes to engage the returning enemy. Follow the rhino, snaps the sister superior, looking at the colonel. She motions with her bolter for me to stand up, and I push myself to my feet. Your fate will be decided at the Abbey. She runs after her companions, squad following in around her, heading towards the renewed flare and roar of conflict. I look at the silver armored warriors advancing undaunted across the brazen horns and flashing aura of the Warpborn. For a moment they shine, perhaps just the stray beam of a searchlight on their armor. But the host of battle sisters gleams against the shadows, every one of them sheathed in a pale illumination. I suppose it's quite fitting, right, that the battle sisters are here. That it's quite fitting the battle sisters are here because the series started with them. The scariest thing about the Battle Sisters is not even their sassiness, which is renowned. It's the fact that you can have so many soldiers in power armor in one place. You're gonna have far more soldiers in power armor than the Space Marines could afford to have. And on top of that, what the power armor allows them to do, and I'm not sure if it's still like this, but from what I remember, like and there were never, and see, it was kind of cool because there were never many Sisters of Battle armies. Now they're called Adeptus Serratus, but before they were just the Sisters of Battle. They're still Battle Sisters. In fact, he calls them Sisters of Battle and whatever in the first book. They can hold those heavy weapons, those multi meltas and las cannons. I don't. Okay, they don't carry las cannons, but they carry heavy flamers and multi meltas. They love those things, and you can't. Like a regular guy would just treat that basically as like a heavy weapon. I think it's just so heavy. It's ridiculous. They'd be able to like move or shoot with it, not both. But they just like walk with them casually, and yeah, that's kind of their claim. That's kind of the claim to fame of the Adeptus Serratus is they can kind of just like casually wade into battle, chanting their chants. It's ridiculously they're ridiculously expensive, and just in any way you can think about it, they're just ridiculously expensive. So it falls to the ecclesiarchy to be able to afford such a force, and of course they do because everyone pays the tithes. You pay the tithe, or you pay with your life. Okay, and I realize the tithes go to the administratum, but I know that the ecclesiarchy has ways of gaining funds. I was hoping the journey to the Abbey might provide some sense of relief, but it feels just as fraught as every stage of our flight from the Underhive before. It combines the eerie emptiness of the ghost city with the feeling of imminent battle that dogged us throughout the Orc territories. Everywhere are reminders that not only is this a planet contested for several years, but also that a new foe has arrived to sweep away all that came before. Seeing command keeps and artillery pits empty, some of them with bodies still lying in the grime, is a stark reminder of the speed of the withdrawal. Hasty, I would say. I can see Orskia and the others looking carefully as we pass abandoned supply depots, some of them with tanks, a promethium, and barrels still stored. Here and there, shells of ammunition crates are piled in magazines. Camouflage netting covers boxes of rations, piles of bedrolls, and other sundries. I can see the scavengers itching to. I can see the scavengers itching to let loose on those supplies, but stern exchanges with the elders holds them back. The fear of retaliation from the Battle Sisters outweighs the instinct to take what they can and make a break through the wastes again. We follow the Adeptus Serratus Rhino as it churns through the dirt, cutting through the slit trenches, past stretches of razor wire, and around tank trap lines, winding between emplacements. It feels like we're intruding upon something hallowed, the noise of the engine and our own progression disturbing the still. Corpse flies buzz around the cadavers, marked with cruel blades, rotted beyond a few days. Some of them don't even look human, their flesh contorted and melted into strange shapes, bones bent like heated plastic. Even more disturbing are the corpses with grateful smiles on their faces, trapped in bliss at the moment of death. Not a lot of the dead, certainly not the numbers you've seen after a massed battle, but evidence that the retreat was not wholly without opposition. I see no orcs, nor no evidence the Xenos made it this far into the Imperial zone. Why did they leave? Asks Olesh, trudging along. Dinas, wrapped tight in the makeshift sling, against his chest, firmly gripping the hand of Ferran, who stares with naked curiosity at the surroundings. Don't know, I say, keeping my misgivings to myself. Was it warp born? The child asks. The question is asked with a quiver of fear and darted looks at the shadowed entrances to bunkers around us. Probably, I'd say. I guess they appeared here too. There's a warp board on the other side that wants in. A little demon. Come here, come here. Come here, you demon.